the Matildas have engaged the nation, Tones. They've engaged the nation. People are watching them in bars, Fed Square, open stadiums around the country.
All around the country.
Absolutely. And, there's been talks about the economic impact that the Matildas have had on the country during such hard times. So I'll hand it over to you first to get a bit of a, an outlook about their performance, what's been happening, so on and so on.
Well, there's no doubt it's been a massive fillip for the country of Australia. I mean, if we go back some, 2, 3, 4, 5 months, Channel 7 didn't even have the rights to broadcast the Matildas games. They've outlaid $5 million on the back of a deal with Optus Vision in Australia, Optus Sport. And now the ratings success that it's had for Channel 7 has been over the moon. It's been off the charts. So if we take you through the numbers, this is the game against France on Saturday night. 6.2 million broadcast reach around the nation. The average national broadcast, 4.17 million people. Now, that's nearly the NRL and the AFL numbers combined. That's how many people were watching Australia v France Saturday night. The country's number one game, the AFL, even pushed back the starting time of the Carlton-Melbourne game. That's how important this game is to the culture of this country. But in saying that, just to divert the attention for the moment, but the other thing is, Ahmed, which I'd like your opinion on, Saturday night at the Gabba, they stopped the coverage at 7 p.m. At the MCG, they stopped the coverage of the game at 7 p.m, much to the chagrin of the paying public. So is this something that the MCG or the ground took off their main screens, or did the AFL instruct them to? Because as much as it is galvanising Australians and the entire population, I'm sure the AFL and the NRL are privately thinking, well, we don't want people turning to soccer in favour of our own sports. So that's just a little side issue that we have to be considerate of. Now, back to the numbers. The peak viewership from Australia v France was at 4.43 million people. It's the number one program of the last decade. And we had in Brisbane at the ground, we had 49,000 people there. Enormous. Now, as we both know, both being from Melbourne, if it was to be played at the MCG, there would have been double that amount of people. But that's just where they played the game. It has been enormous. And I know the majority of pubs in Sydney were at standing room only Saturday night. I mean, this was on the edge of your seat type stuff, Ahmed. I know you haven't been a big fan. You are still a skeptic in terms of the women playing soccer. But you can't detract from what they've been able to achieve. They beat France on penalty 7-6. It was incredible. And for many who were sceptical about this World Cup and even, women's soccer as a whole, I think now it's hard to argue that they've had enormous success and have now become part of the Australian vernacular of everyday people.
Awesome. Sounds absolutely awesome.
No need for
I'm not skeptical of them playing soccer. I'm just not interested. I just don't find it entertaining. That's all it is. And I'm entitled to that.
Tell us why. I mean,
because
what you and I say off camera is different to what you say on camera. So
why do we?
A lot of our fans and viewers want to know why you have such a skeptical view of women's sport as a whole, and in this particular instance.
No, I actually don't. I don't have a skeptical view of women's sport as a whole. I've watched women's tennis my whole life. I've watched, hockey my whole life, and I've always watched these sorts of sports. Now, that's not my problem. My problem is when I'm watching the soccer, it's miles off. It's not even close. When you have under 15s beating the best team in the world, by 12-0 or 12-1, I just can't do it, mate. I just can't watch it. And that same goes with the AFLW. It's miles off. So that's it. And that's my preference. That's my preference.
Soccer as a world sport, even as an Australian sport, women's soccer is far more advanced than AFLW is.
Well, of course, Tony. AFL just came into the fold less than 10 bloody years ago. We didn't even have leagues around the state. Like we barely had local leagues. Now every single team's bringing in every single league's bringing in teams.
Yeah.
So it's got nothing to do with that. What I'm trying to say to you is, for me personally, as someone who watches every single football league, men's football league, it's a huge drop. I can't watch it. To me personally, right?
Yeah, the World Cup, this happens once every 4 years.
I don't care. It means nothing to me. It means nothing to a lot of people, because if Channel 7 didn't have the rights until a couple of months out, what does that say to you? If FIFA were struggling to sell the female rights in Europe, what does that say to you? Which is the heart of soccer, right?
Yeah.
And don't give me the time zone bullshit. I'm not buying that, because if you put a men's segment for sale, they're fighting over it all around the world, billions of dollars at stake. You know why? Because it's entertaining. You know what? It's fast. It's aggressive. You want to watch it. This doesn't do it for me, mate. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is.
That's fine. You're entitled to your opinion, but it is hard, even for the most skeptical, like yourself, to get engaged in this Women's World Cup. Now, as much as we like to detract from the sport as a whole, it's a once in every 4 years event, and the whole of Australia is getting behind it. The projected numbers for tomorrow night's Australia-England game will be off the charts. Now, if you think, we've spoken about the numbers of Australia v Denmark and now Australia v France, it's going to be hard to avoid the euphoria, even prior to the game, in regards to Australia v England. The English and the Dutch settled Australia as a colony some 200 years ago. So you imagine how many people in Australia and now in Wales are now going to be invested into tomorrow night's game in Sydney. Now, the weather's not going to be great, but outside of that, it's going to be a spectacle that's going to be hard to avoid.
Well, anything Australia v England is huge. Like,
of course, but doesn't that then therefore carry on?
Yeah. Well, not for me personally. Well, just to your point, I didn't even watch most of the Ashes this year. I just watched highlights.
No, but yes, but I agree. But it was actually, I'm not a huge cricket fan. I stopped being invested in cricket from a 17-year-old. But of the recent Ashes series, it was hard to avoid. And I mean that in a good way, because not only was it about, 22 players on the field going toe-to-toe at each other, the peripheral stuff, as we discussed last week, if not the week before, about the entities and the characters in the game made it hard to avoid. And I mean that in a good way. I think Cricket Australia and the English Cricket Foundation, I can't think of their exact acronym, they have done an incredible job in bringing cricket back to the fore so that as many people as possible become engaged. And I think they did a really good job this time around. That's why I'm thinking now it's the flow on is going to be enormous. I think you probably have to be in a deep underground bunker to avoid any type of knowledge of what happens between Australia and England tomorrow night in Sydney. Yeah,
there you go. Let's talk about the economic impact that this World Cup has had on the country. It has been reported that $7.6 billion has been injected into the economy. Sorry, mate?
You said billion, correct?
Correct. Has been injected into the economy, which is great for Australians during a very, very tough time. 4.53 billion of that is from travellers and foreign exchange, and that comes from a report from the Airwallex general manager for Australia and New Zealand.
You say 4.53 billion?
Yeah.
Through travelling?
From travellers and foreign exchange.
No, I find that number extraordinarily high.
Why is that? It's half. It's just over half.
Well, because if we're having 49,000 people to a game in Brisbane, I would say 90% of those are locals or interstaters. So there'd be, 10% would be from overseas, how can they then generate some near 5 billion into the local economy if the total amount was some 7.6? It doesn't equate.
Have you noticed a difference in your city in terms of people and so on and so on?
No, but look, to be honest, I haven't left the bubble of the eastern suburbs, but I do know that private jet travel to Sydney and Brisbane and Wellington is up, which is where the World Cup games are being played. Merchandise is up. Pubs are up. But I still don't think that international visitors and the tourism dollar could generate 4.53 billion based on 3 to 4 weeks of World Cup. It doesn't equate.
It comes to make you think and question a few other figures, because I know people myself who are in the world of security contractors who were promised thousands of hours and are lucky to get a couple hundred, and
Now,
and that's not because they're not competent. It's because there's nothing on. That's
but in terms of, let's specify the people that you're talking to in the security industry. Are they talking about security at the grounds for the games?
The grounds, yeah.
So talking about, there was a game at Amy Park.
Yeah.
Who played again?
The Matildas, and it was a couple of games ago. I can't remember now a bit.
Yes. So they were guaranteed work at that ground at Amy Park in the centre of Melbourne, and they weren't given any.
They did get to work, but the amount of work is different, is completely different to what they were promised leading up to the World Cup.
Well, give me an example. So pre-World Cup, they were guaranteed what, 1,000 hours?
Plus, with all these hundreds of guards, and they were telling them, load up your guards, load up this, make sure we have enough guys to go. They had hundreds of people do inductions and checks and so on and so on. Comes to the World Cup, a couple of hundred hours, literally. And like, even like, and another thing that makes me question the figures is like, you have a commentator saying there's not a spare seat in the house, and they turn the camera at, I can't remember which player it was, she was throwing it in, and there was half a stand behind it that was bloody empty.
Is it from the Matildas game?
Yeah. So this is the thing, right? And this is one of the things that's really turned me off this World Cup, is that there's so much hype, but very little substance. Like, yes, the women's game is great, but if it's so great, why are you signing media deals to a couple of months before the World Cup starts? Why are you struggling to sell media rights in Europe in the heart of soccer, where they're apparently selling out stadiums, 90,000 people, right? So I just don't understand how all this works. It just doesn't make sense to me. The numbers just don't make sense. I personally believe a lot of it's been inflated to make it sound like more than what it is. And you could call me skeptical, you could call me negative, whatever you want to call me, but things just don't add up.
Yeah, well, maybe you're right. Look, I must take my hat off to Channel 7 CEO James Warburton. He either was incredibly smart and got the deal of a lifetime, or the timing was just magnificent for him.
What did he pay for it?
Well, somewhere near enough, around $5 million
for a World Cup.
For a World Cup. So nobody, I think you even discussed this on one of our previous programs, that Optus and FIFA found it hard to sell off the rights. Optus Sport in Australia bought every game, and then Channel 7 was on sold those games, which is why Channel 7's commentators aren't heard commentating the ball-by-ball play. So they're taking the feed from Optus, and they bought that at such a reduced rate. Considering the Matildas' success, they will make an unknown amount of money based on the ratings and with the success of the Matildas.
Do you watch it on Channel 7?
Yes, I do.
Well, what kind of brands are advertising? If you recall.
Well, I think all the blue chips. So there'd be like Coca-Cola, Adidas, Qatar Airways, all the big ones.
Oh, Qatar Airways! Don't say Qatar Airways. A few people might be rubbed the wrong way after the latest events. But anyway.
Oh yeah. Well, look, in terms of that, what happens in that country is completely different. So, if we don't have the Coca-Colas of the world, the Adidases of the world, and the Qatari Airlines, people whinge and say, oh, well, they support the agenda back in Saudi Arabia, but then they forget without all this money, progress doesn't happen. So it's a catch-22.